with Sensible Colorado. And it's just interesting the feedback and all the traction that we've had here in Colorado, especially in social media, after the governor's comments about don't break out the Cheetos and the goldfish. And on your perspective, you're working on a national level. How are you involved in supporting these local organizations to help pass policy on a state level, and why state versus federal? Can you explain a little bit of the politics behind that?
Well, we've seen that while state governments and voters within states seem to be willing to change their marijuana laws drastically, we don't have nearly as much traction on a federal level. So we found that it's best to work on a state level and basically try to reform these policies in the exact same way that alcohol prohibition ended, by passing laws state by state and then eventually forcing the federal government to change their position or at least stop enforcing their outdated policies.
And, you know, I'm sure you're keeping a lot of track on what's happening in Colorado. We've had over 50,000 more votes for this amendment than actually for the President of the United States, which goes to show how popular this amendment is with the public. What are your thoughts on the response, maybe Governor Hickenlooper's response to the passing of this amendment, sort of minimizing what are your thoughts on that, and how does this affect your movement or the movement for legalization of marijuana?
Well, it's unfortunate that his cliched pot joke is getting a lot more press than the really important statement that he made, which was that the people have spoken and that the state is going to do everything it can to implement this program. Whether or not we're going to see too much federal interference there remains to be seen, but I tend to think not, and one of the reasons is what you just mentioned. Marijuana reform, and particularly Amendment 64, is extremely popular and far more popular than the administration, and obviously much more popular than the current policies. So I don't think there's a lot of political capital there to be able to interfere with state law in this fashion. Of course, it depends on how much autonomy the Department of Justice has and whether or not they decide they want to waste their resources enforcing failed federal policies when, or in direct contrast to what the people of the state of Colorado want to do.
What next after this huge win here in Colorado? What next for an organization of the Marijuana Policy Project? What next for you? Where are you moving towards? What areas, which states you feel have a promising outlook in terms of passing similar laws?
Well, that remains to be seen still. I think that there's going to be a lot of discussion in the next few months and looking at poll numbers, looking at different states to see what sort of grassroots support there is and what sort of legislative support there is. You know, it's possible that there could be other ballot initiatives going on in 2014, and it's almost certain that there will be some in the next presidential election. But in the meantime, we're going to be doing a lot of lobbying work from state to state, trying to get legislators to pass sensible marijuana policy reforms.
What can the average person do to support your work and also to, I guess, reinforce their vote? What can they do?
Well, the two easiest things are donating, because these campaigns take a lot of money, and as long as we can keep outspending our opposition, then we have a serious shot at being able to keep up our momentum. But really the easiest thing that you can do as just a voter is to contact your elected representatives. Make sure that they know that they don't have to be afraid of this issue anymore, and make sure that they know that if you're really passionate about it, your vote might depend on them being on the right side of this issue.
How about, and you mentioned this is, I was actually going to ask, how expensive is it to lobby for something like this? It's obviously very expensive. Where do people go donate?
They can just go to npp.org, and it's very easy. There's a big donation box right there. And it varies in cost from state to state, and because we're a small nonprofit, we have to really be careful about where we spend our resources. I know that you know, sometimes our membership will feel like they're being left out because we're not concentrating in their particular state. But what people have to remember is that the more states we pass, the more likely we'll be able to get reforms passed in other states. So
it's sort of like the peer pressure, moving from one state to the other, and politicians understanding that this is sort of the trend. Why Colorado? Is it because we've already passed some reform laws here, so it felt like there was some momentum?
Well, there was a lot of support for this change before. A previous ballot initiative to do something similar to Amendment 64 narrowly failed previously, and so we felt that we could really build on our past successes. Plus, there's a very, very well-regulated medical marijuana industry already existing in Colorado. So when people are able to look at that and look at the example of something that's tightly controlled and very well run by legitimate business owners, the things that are being proposed by Amendment 64 no longer seemed as alien to them.
So the learning curve is smaller, if you will, correct? Because we've already been in this environment.
People are much more comfortable voting for something that they have at least a little bit of experience with. And once they can picture what a well-regulated marijuana market looks like, they're much more likely to support it.
Right. In terms of moving the policy forward, give us some examples of the numbers. Like, how many people are arrested nationally, daily, for just possession of marijuana? How big of an issue is this?
One person is arrested in America every 42 seconds for marijuana.
Oh my God.
We had, I think it was just about, I think the total arrest numbers for marijuana crimes were about 750,000 for 2011. It was a slight decrease, and there are a number of factors lead to that, but it's not that much of a decrease, and it just shows that arrests have nothing to do with use rates, because the use rates actually have stayed about the same but slightly increasing over the last few years. You know, and I think that the majority of Americans, at least according to Gallup and Rasmussen polls, have shown that they're sick of their taxpayer money going to arrest nonviolent marijuana users, particularly since marijuana is demonstrably safer than alcohol.
In terms of these laws, rather than just servicing or in service of potheads, it's, you know, like the governor maybe has labeled it by mentioning Cheetos and goldfish. What is your base user? What do you think from your studies? Who is benefiting from these laws the most?
Anyone that pays taxes is benefiting from it. Anyone who has ever had a friend or relative get arrested and face the consequences of a marijuana conviction, whether it be jail time, fines, loss of employment potential because of a criminal record, loss of ability to get student loans, anyone who the war on marijuana has touched, which is basically every adult in this country. I think that when people really start looking at the harms that marijuana prohibition has caused, it becomes a no-brainer. This is not just about people being able to get high. This is about people not having to support with their hard-earned wages one of the most disastrously failed policies in our country's history.
Well, thank you for all the work that you've done. Anywhere that people can keep up with the latest happenings, mpp.org, is that where they can follow the news and the policy?
That's right. We also have very easy ways to contact your lawmakers. We've got forms all set up for people to do that in every state and every locality. And we're also available on Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you so much for your time. And everyone, please get involved, at least by showing your support of the people who did pass these laws, and certainly donating to mpp.org. Thank you so much, Morgan, for your time, and we'll see you soon. We'll keep up in touch.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.